It was so unexpected.
You had to be there.
Covering Celtic at that time was a brilliant thing. The atmosphere at Parkhead was always great.
You had to be there.
Nobody ever talks about this game. Nobody saw it.
You had to be there.
Yeah, it's nearly 9:10. It is Thursday morning. You're watching OTB AM, and it is very much time for You Had to Be There. He's not here, but he is over there. Michael Verney, good morning to you.
Lads, how are you? It's abandonship along the quays, unfortunately.
Traffic is brutal.
I found a spot here, and I'm just hoping I'm not ejected or thrown up on the back of a lorry or something during the show, but we'll do our best.
Well, listen, at the very least, we'll do some good numbers out of that, so we'll deal with that if it crops up. We'll get into it because it's a great list. It's notable by some absences, which we might get to in a little bit. But kick us off. We're going to go in chronological order here, and we're kicking off with Joe Canning, Fitzgibbon Cup Final 2008.
It was actually only a Fitzgibbon Cup group game. I picked this game probably because I was involved in it myself, and I'd heard so much about Joe growing up, and I'd watched him on TV and various bits and pieces, but it's only when you see someone in the flesh that you realise, okay, this lad is a little bit different. And there's actually a lot of mitigating circumstances with this game. So we had the possibility of playing Portumna in All-Ireland Club Final in 2008. We were both in the semi-finals, and the semi-finals were fixed for 10 days later, and there was this big Fitzgibbon Cup game on the Thursday before that. And we went over to LIT with Joel, obviously a big city derby. Joe was full forward for them. I was playing cornerback for UL. He was actually only on the pitch 20 minutes. 20 minutes, and within that time, he had scored a penalty, he had scored 2 frees, and he actually pulled up his hamstring and was leaving the pitch when the ball rolled out over the sideline, and Davy got him to hit the sideline with a strained or torn hamstring before he left the pitch, and he lofted the sideline ball over the bar, and I was just like, literally like an audible gasp of breath and thinking, this lad is built completely differently.
And left the pitch afterwards?
Left the pitch. It was literally like the ball was going out over the sideline as he was being helped off by the physio and members of the LIT backroom team. And Davey was literally like, will you take this? So he gets down, takes the sideline from about 60 yards out with a partially torn hamstring, puts it over the bar, and you're just thinking, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like that a fella can do this, and he's injured. And then even just other parts of it, then 10 days later he scores 1-9 in All-Ireland Club semi-final against Lockmore. A month after that he breaks our hearts in a club final, and then about 3 or 4 months after that he goes to town on Cork in that famous qualifier. But it was my first insight to see up close and personal just how good. You know, you hear all the talk and you hear what he's done with Portumna Vocational Schools. You see him on TV and in a couple of club finals and big games, and then you see him up close and you're thinking, okay, the talk is totally warranted. This lad is going to be the next hurling superstar, and he was. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. At the end of the game, the game finished up level. We needed a win to go through. They needed a draw to go through. What was the difference? Canning's line ball before he left the pitch. I was literally rubbing my eyes in disbelief at what this guy was able to do, and he's only on the pitch 20 minutes. He's
one of those players, Mick, when you go to watch a match in person, he's actually, we all know he's a big unit, but he's nearly bigger than you expect him to be. Like, was it the same on the pitch when you're up close? I'm not going to ask you to admit that you were afraid of Joe Canning on the pitch or anything to that effect, but I'm sure when he comes near you on the pitch, you know about it. Yeah, 100%, Shane. He has all the skill. He's a great hand, great wrist, everything like that. But as well as that, he's about 6'3", 6'4". That time he was only a young fella, but he was such a big, strong physical force. You knew if you got the ball in around him, or he got the ball in around you, that you were probably going to be blown away, even physically. And that was my first. It was my first time to probably share a field with him.
Where were you playing?
As I said, I was playing cornerback, yeah. So he was in around. He was full forward, so he would have been in around him. Thankfully, he wasn't marking him. But just to actually see it up close, and it's probably a throwaway game that very, very few people remember. But I just remember being hit by this kind of bullet almost, and thinking, yeah, this guy is going to be something else.
Were you chatting about him before, Mick? Like, was there, obviously the chat had begun, as you say. Did you say it was a couple of months before the 2-12 match?
It was about 3 or 4 months before that 2008 qualifier against Cork down in Semple Stadium, where he really announced himself. You know, I think he hit something like 211, and I think he said since that one of his biggest regrets is playing too well on his, one of his early championship games, because the bar was set so high. But just the chain of events that happened, 10 days later he was man of the match in a club semi-final. A month after that he was winning another club title, and then 4 or 5 months later he was delivering probably one of the great inter-county performances. And it was my first time to share a field with him. I just remember thinking, this guy is completely different, and it's nice to know what it's like to even share a field with him and know what he can do on a pitch. And I like, anytime he stepped up to anything in a game thereafter, I was always thinking, yeah, he's probably going to nail this, regardless of whether it's the 4 line balls against Galway in that or against Limerick in that semi-final in 20 or whatever it is. And it's like what Shane says there. It's like going to a match with David Clifford, where David Clifford is player now. You literally think anything is possible, and that given day it was.
I'm putting you on the spot here slightly, Mick, but where does Canning rank in terms of hurling's greatest placed ball hitters?
Oh, Jesus, Shane, very, very high. I'd have TJ Reid up ridiculously high as well, because I just think he's so consistent now, and he's probably a 95, 96%. But as regards being able to hit a line ball from anywhere inside 100 yards and have the potential to score, being able to hit free anywhere 120 yards and maybe even further at times, he's probably right up there, isn't he? Like, he was hitting frees, lads, in All-Ireland club finals when he was 16 or 17, like, do you know what I mean? And I think he scored a line ball from midfield against Loughrea in a Galway county final when he was 15, senior county final. This is just like, there's lads that are able to put over line balls now. I don't know if anybody will be able to do it as well as he did. And just like, they're not scoring chances, lads, unless you're a freak, and he was an absolute hurling freak.
When you're like you say, you weren't marking him, but just one last one on it before we move on to your next one. Like, when you're on the pitch, or like your man next to you is sort of marking him, like, what's the chat beforehand, or what's the chat on the pitch about, like, given everything you've just said about how impossible a task it is to get the better of him, is it just like, listen, we're just going to accept that he's going to score 10 or 11 points today, and that's it, and if we do that and get out of Dodge, it's not a bad day? Kind of,
yeah. It's kind of like deny. Just keep the ball away from him as much as you possibly can. And it's probably having real serious conversations with guys out the field, where if ball is coming into Canning, it has to be at least bad ball. It has to be a ball that gives the defender a chance. Because if he's getting advantageous ball into him, like, you're on a hiding to nothing no matter who you are.
Right, we skip forward 3 years. It's 2011. It's the Kilkenny Senior Hurling Championship final replay. It's Eoin Larkin up against Henry's Ballyhale. Larkin was 27, and he was a well-established Kilkenny player, obviously, at that point. Hurler of the Year in 2008. Set this one out for us.
So I was at both games. I was at the drawn game where Henry had to hit free to level it in horrendous conditions, and one of the village players was literally 4 yards away from him with the hurl in his face, and it was not blown or retaken or like that. He just took it and put it over the bar, and it was sent to a replay then. I went down to the replay, and to me, this is the greatest club hurling performance of all time. Literally everything Larkin did on that day turned to gold, and I'm not just talking about his frees, and his frees were impeccable. He hit 8 from 8. He ended up with 111, 8 frees. Literally, his hooking, his blocking, his hand passing, the goal he got was just ridiculous within such a confined space with 4 guys on him. I've never seen as perfect a display of hurling as this. It was a brilliant individual display. It was a brilliant individual display within a brilliant team display. He brought teammates into the game. Conditions were really, really rough. And when you just see a guy literally taking the game by the scruff of the neck. He literally took the game by the scruff of the neck. And as you said there, Adrian, this was a Ballyhale team with a young TJ Reid who's going to be one of the best players of all time. Henry, who is widely regarded as one of the best of all time. Cha Fitzpatrick, young Richie Reid in goals. Colin Fennelly and Jackie Tyrrell actually both got sent off the same day. So, like, the village were without their other main talisman in Jackie Tyrrell, and Larkin just grew another foot taller. He was completely unmarkable on that day. And I'd encourage anybody to go and find it on Twitter. It's on the Village's account. It's a 60-minute game, 60-minute club game, and there's 4 minutes of outrageous highlights from Larkin. It's literally a highlight reel of, it's everything that encompasses a good hurling display. It's all the scores, all the flicks. He gets back and hooks Owen Reid at one stage and the ball goes wide. I've never seen, it's like, you talk about giving a player 10 out of 10. He literally did not do anything wrong. There were, this is Nadia Comaneci-esque. There is no points you could take away from his performance. It was absolutely outrageous.
That's the stamp of a leader, isn't it? When a team goes down to 14 men, some players wilt and kind of curl up under the pressure, but and accept defeat. But when Tyrrell gets sent off in that game, Larkin obviously almost pushes him on further, as you say, Mick.
Yeah, the great players, I think, Shane, sometimes realise with different scenarios in games, okay, somebody's gone off injured. I need to even rise a bit. And even you could say maybe Shane Walsh the other night for Kilmacud was having a tough evening. Paul Mannion goes off. He probably realises, okay, the pressure is on me a little more now. But the great players don't wilt under that pressure. They grow with that pressure. And definitely Larkin did that day. And it was literally the same day that we're looking out the windows and seeing today. Real wet, miserable afternoon down in Nolan Park. And they're against, one of the great club teams of all time. And this fella just delivers a display that, I haven't seen the like of it before, and I haven't seen it since. And that's 11 years ago. I always go back to that is, the greatest individual club display I've ever seen. And I've stood in the same pitch as Brian Whelan, where he's done crazy things. But even as good as he was, I'm not sure if he delivered that perfect display like Larkin did here. I remember chatting Niall Rigney about it. He was the James Stephens manager, and he just said, as a manager, this is literally dreamland. You're looking at a player literally just lifting the whole team up and taking them by the scruff of the neck. And everything he did seemed to give more lads around him confidence. And I'd say lads around him did things maybe that day that they haven't done or they didn't do before or since, just because of the confidence that he bred into them that day.
Yeah.
111. 111 is a scandalous individual scoreline, but then when you think about it, it's probably not even the highest he's ever scored at club level. 111 is remarkable individual scoring, but he was probably so used to doing that in the Kilkenny Championship as well, Mick.
Yeah, he would have been. Yeah, he would have been. Even he broke onto the Kilkenny panel as a result of having an unbelievable year out centre forward. That was his that was his statement season. I think it was in 04 or 05 where he was called in as a result of when the Village ended up winning the Club All Ireland. And this is 111 out of 120. And lads, this is before the last 5 or 6 years where lads are probably routinely putting that up at club level. The ball is maybe a bit lighter. Hurls are of a lot better standard. Lads are better conditioned probably. This is an absolutely outrageous tally. And I challenge anybody to find a better hurling performance in a club game than this. It's outrageous.
Is it a fair argument? I'm just looking at his Eoin Larkin stats for Kilkenny here, and he's got the 8 All-Irelands, but only two All-Stars, Mick. Does that hint at an underrated player perhaps at intercounty level?
Oh yeah, underrated would be the word you'd use. He has a hurler of the year in there as well, but I think it's a hurler of the year from 08, the year to beat Waterford in the final. But he definitely would have been underrated, just because I suppose it's only natural when you have in the same team JJ Delaney, Tommy Walsh, Noel Hickey, Henry Shefflin, Richie Power, Eddie Brennan. But he was, I just think he was unbelievable throughout his Kilkenny career. They probably haven't replaced him yet, and probably will be a while replaced him in that sense of a real dogged half forward that gets up and down the line and does that work, but can also kill you on the scoreboard as well. And just an unbelievable hand as well. Such a good hand in the air, so deceptive. That left-hander that comes in behind you on the high ball, and very, very hard to deal with. Great player.
They had a tight turnaround then because the replay nature of it, and Jackie suspended and they lose out to Owlert, I think it was about 6 days later by 3 points. Again, he scores 11 points, by the way, so that's what you're dealing with there. Move on to selection number 3. We're skipping ahead 7 years now, 2018. It's the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. It's Khabib beating McGregor. And the context here, Khabib is the undefeated lightweight champion. McGregor's been stripped of his title, I think, at that point due to inactivity, if I'm right. The Diaz loss and the rematch win was done. It was a year on from the Mayweather nonsense at the same venue, I think. And a bad-tempered build-up.
Yeah, very bad-tempered. I was over there in media capacity. I kind of was letting on.
You didn't need the inverted commas there. We understood.
letting on I was working, but I wasn't really working. It was actually, we were knocked out of the hurling championship with Borough that year, and I tried to turn a negative into a positive. That fight was actually on the same day as my birthday, so I got on to one of my mates who actually lives in China, but was over doing a bit of business in America, and I said, we need to meet in Vegas and try and go to this fight or whatever. So I actually went and got my accreditation, and I was at all the build up to it. And as you say, Adrian, it was very bad tempered. At that time, it was and probably still is one of the biggest UFC fights in history. And there was so much kind of riding on it. I'd enjoy playing a bit of blackjack and playing a bit of roulette, and anything I won in the build up to the fight, rather than losing it at another table, I decided to invest it in McGregor. So I had a good few quid on McGregor going into the fight, and then you kind of see maybe some of the nonsense that he was coming out with in the pressers in the days beforehand, and you might think maybe he's not in the best mental state maybe coming into this fight. But the whole build up to it, like it was at a time when I'd bought into McGregor quite a bit, and he probably hadn't maybe sullied his reputation too much at that stage. But I was kind of nervous even watching the fight. We did a lovely view of the fight. It was absolutely brilliant. It was so tense in the days coming up to it, and even the atmosphere around Vegas was very, very tense. And then the fight started, and Khabib delivered an absolute exhibition of just grappling and being able just to grind McGregor down and just take his striking completely out of the equation. But it was just so tense during the fight. And a lot of this is to do with just having been there for the fight and the build up, and having been there for the absolute chaos after. I've never been at any sporting event that resembled anything like that in the aftermath.
Well, it was like you'd spoke about the nature of the fight, and it was obviously very personal for Khabib, and that became really evident. So there's a fourth round stoppage. He gets him in a neck crank, and McGregor taps out, and Khabib barks down at him from a standing position. Not entirely unfamiliar to Irish football fans, maybe, or Man United football fans, in a way that looks like he's saying almost, "Take that, you star." And he flings his mouth guard down, flings himself over the top of the octagon, and all hell breaks loose. Where were you sat for all that?
I was sat up in the media centre, as I said, working, doing a bit of work. But I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because like he's such a humble, kind of soft-natured fella outside of the octagon, an absolute killer inside, but so respectful. And it was clear how McGregor and maybe members of his team, probably Dylan Dennis in particular, had gotten that much under his skin that it just caused him to completely snap. Imagine to say a guy could be that, not relaxed inside the cage, but was able to stick to his game plan, do everything that he does best. And then nearly the second the bell was rang, maybe there's a few people shouting bits and pieces at him, and he throws his mouth guard and just goes with like a flying kung fu kick in the direction of Dylan Dennis, and I know John Kavanagh wasn't too far away, and it was just absolute chaos. They probably didn't have enough security guards there on the night. It was just madness in the few minutes thereafter, and then we were all trying to get down to the media scrum, to the media tent after, just to see exactly what would happen there, and we were probably waiting about an hour, and Khabib came in and just delivered kind of a speech for about 4.5 minutes, and there was no questions asked or anything like that. He said what he had to say, and he left. And I remember a lot of people getting on to me after, because they knew I was over there, and just saying, mind yourself or stay safe or whatever. And I remember being at some sort of a vodka launch or something the day before, one of the big vodka companies that sponsors them, and I just remember getting a picture with these two models, and I just put up a picture maybe the next day and says on Facebook, was like, no need to worry, lads, I'm in safe hands. And it was just, everything about it was just a bit mad. And there was a weird vibe around the strip in Vegas that night, a real weird, dangerous, kind of violent vibe about it. I've never been, at a soccer game in Galatasaray or anything like that where there's that kind of can be that violent vibe to it. It was such a strange thing to be involved in, but something that I definitely look back on with great memories. I have to say, it's one of those you had to be there moments.
You can kind of tell through the TV to an extent. You can kind of feel the atmosphere at some of those UFC events, but you can't really. I mean, what's those walkouts, especially, Mick, when Sinead O'Connor comes on over the Tannoy and you've got so many Irish fans, and I think it's 20,000 odd people that can fit into the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. Like, what was that like, that walkout moment? It's obviously something special when you're there in person.
Yeah, even as we're talking about it here now, I'd have the goosebumps in it, because I love that pageantry element of it. I'd be a big wrestling fan, and I wouldn't hide it. And part of my love of it is the pageantry of it all, and those walkouts, the McGregor walkout. I would have loved to have been there when he fought Chad Mendes, when Sinead was actually singing live. But this was unbelievable, and I think they said it even live in commentary, looking back at the event after. McGregor's entrance is one of the great things probably in all of sport and entertainment. And when he does the Vince McMahon Billy walk around the octagon and all that, it's something that I'd say it has to be kind of seen to be believed. Yeah, I was so nervous even going into the fight, and luckily I didn't need to be partial or anything like that, and I was just there kind of as a fan. But it was definitely something I'd try and do again. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah. Right, and from one, obviously, as you say, we've gotten to know McGregor a little bit more in the meantime, and a lot of things to not like about him. So from one person that I definitely struggle to get behind, to another that the entire country is very much behind and really stole the headline. So I'll paint a bit of the picture, making you take it up again. It's Rachael Blackmore. It's A Plus Tard, Cheltenham in the Gold Cup this year. The context here, she'd been doing some brilliant stuff, big wins, Honeysuckle, A Plus Tard, Envoy Alan over previous years. She'd an entry Grand National under her belt, top jockey at Cheltenham last year, and had done well even on Honeysuckle at Cheltenham that week. But no female jockey had ever won the Cheltenham Gold Cup. That and the disappointment of having some come so close in 2021.
Yeah, I suppose that's a lot of it, Adrian, is how much she'd achieved the year before. I wasn't at Cheltenham the year before. There was no Irish media at Cheltenham the year before. She'd had 6 winners. First ever female rider to win the champion hurdle. First female rider to be crowned champion jockey at Cheltenham. But she will even say herself after that, there was a little asterisk beside that Cheltenham, because she was so disappointed, whether it was picking the wrong horse in the Cheltenham Gold Cup. She stayed on A Plus Tard in 2021 and gave up the ride in Manila Indo, and Jack Kennedy ended up winning the race. And there was maybe a bit of regret of maybe letting Manila Indo get a bit too far away from her and not being able to reel him back in 2021. And for that 2022 Gold Cup, I remember I actually went out and stood infield on the track with Philip Quinn in the Daily Mail at the final fence. And you can't really hear the commentary when you're in there. You're just seeing what you're seeing from fence to fence. And we were looking at the second last jump, and you're thinking, she's probably a bit out of contention here. And then all of a sudden, between the second last fence and the last fence, all of a sudden Rachael takes it up. And you're just thinking, I'm standing beside the last fence here, had my phone out, usually wouldn't take any video or pictures or anything like that, but I have a lovely video of A Plus Tard jumping the last fence with Rachael, and you can just see it, and she's just gone on, and she goes on, and she wins the Gold Cup by the guts of about 20 lengths, and everything she had achieved until that point, as I said, first lady rider to win the champion hurdle, first lady rider to win the entry Grand National, but this is another step up again, and it's not that it was a demon or anything inside of her, but it was her exercising maybe something, or just, getting back a moment maybe that she thought she had lost from the year before, and going on to be a Cheltenham Gold Cup winner. It was unbelievable to be there, and just to see her star go even further into the stratosphere.
Yeah, I remember watching this race at home in the pub, Mick, and like, I guess the fact that it was a reversal of the previous year when Manila Indo won as well, and then the fact, as you say, that it was so dominant, that she pushed on from that final fence and won by, what, it was, 15 or 20 lengths, as you say. The dominance of it was probably the surprising aspect.
Yeah, it wasn't, maybe a classic horse race or a classic piece of jockeyship where you're thinking, they get up and win by a head, like that famous AP McCoy ride in Wichita Lyman in Cheltenham, where he's literally cajoling and whatever. This was just Rachael absolutely oozing class, and just to see the aftermath of it. Like, we walked back, myself and Philip Quinn walked back up the chute, like literally behind Rachael, and just to see what it meant to everybody, and how she's probably just captured everybody's hearts, and just to be there for a part of history. And I think it's important to stay following her career over the next while. Like, she's just she's rewritten the history books in so many ways already, and I'm sure she will continue to do so. But like, to me, the 6 winners at Cheltenham the year before were unbelievable. But this is the cream of the crop. Every jockey. The two races that a jockey grows up wanting to win, a jump jockey, are the Aintree National and the Cheltenham Gold Cup. And she did it, and she did it in such dominant fashion as well.
There's a real Forrest Gump quality emerging here, Mick, between being on the pitch like with Joe Canning, and then you're in the media centre for the McGregor fight, and now you're like coming up the chute behind the winning out Gold Cup winner, and been at the finish line. It's there's definitely a pattern here, but yeah, look, an incredible thing, as you say, like coming two from home, and it's Manila Endo looks like he's heading for home, and that's the way it's going to go. But as Shane said, like a really dominant win in the end. Let's move on to your final pick. It's another very recent one, obviously, if we're going chronologically. It's the All-Ireland hurling final this year, but specifically Gearoid Hegerty for Hegerty for Limerick.
Yeah, similar to Eoin Larkin's display for the Village in 2011. Like, I would put this inter-county performance up against any other inter-county performance I've ever seen. Here's a guy who has, in the previous two All-Irelands, he scored 7 points in 2020 from play. He scored 2-2 in 2021. And you're just thinking, how can he top those two displays? Mm-hmm. And he goes and does it. And it's a similar situation to Larkin as well. Needs really, like most at this time. Cian Lynch is not on the pitch. They're two-time hurler of the year. A player who creates probably so many opportunities for Hegerty. And this guy just... Like, he's a big guy at 6'5" already, but he just stands even taller again. And you knew after about 3 or 4 minutes, once he beautifully flicked up that ball for himself and scored one of the best goals we've probably seen in an All-Ireland final, past one of the best goalkeepers of all time in Owen Murphy. Yeah, like, just outrageous. Top corner finish, literally, a goal that could not be saved. He finished with 1-5 on the day. Again, for me, it's probably, as a defender, I probably appreciate the work and the graft even more so than the scores. He was back at his own 21 at different stages. We'll never get the GPS stats from these elite teams, maybe until someone does a book at some stage, maybe down the line. But like, he must have been covering close to about 15k that day, and literally he did not probably tire until, I'd say, the 75th minute. He probably tired in the last minute, but up until that point, he was literally flawless. And there's a couple of times he got a ball at one stage in the second half, and Limerick really needed a score. And David Blanchfield, who did well when he came on him, actually comes to tackle him, and Hegerty literally just throws him to the ground. This is a guy who's gone, he had been running hard for probably 72 or 73 minutes before that, and he lofts the ball over from about 100 yards. And you're just thinking, this is an absolute force of nature on this day, literally an unstoppable force. And Limerick needed a performance like that from one of their key men to get over the line, because they were pushed to within a pin of their collar. When you're thinking about all the pressure, 3 in a row, all the pressure, he'd had a poor semi-final. Can he deliver anything like the previous two final displays? And he goes out and, deliver something like that. It was probably the best inter-county display I've seen in person. Definitely the best All-Ireland final display I've seen in person.
It was one for the purists as well, making that, you mentioned the early goal, but I think he gets Limerick's last point of the game as well. So as you say, he's going from minute 1 to the last minute, and nice circular feel to a masterful performance when you can lob over the last point of the game for the team as well. Yeah,
exactly. And it's just, yourself, where a lad or a lady could score 5 or 6 in the first half, and you could end up getting man of the match or player of the match. But, to be able to deliver that consistent display over like an inter-county hurling game is 80 minutes now, realistically, between injury time in the first half, injury time in the second half. And to be literally on point and at your best and as close to flawless as possible from minute 1 to minute 80. And like, I don't recall, I've looked back at it since, I don't really remember making a mistake. You know, people would have said that, you know, his tackling maybe was a bit borderline at different stages. He didn't give away a free in the All-Ireland final. He scored 1-5. He set up loads of other attacks. He grafted. He worked. He was as much of a defender as an attacker throughout the game. And the thing, as I said as well, when the need was greatest for one of their marquee men to step up, he definitely stepped up.
He's you mentioned the physicality and the strength of Hegerty as well there, Mick, and I think it's Cabra O'Callaghan came on board with John Kiley as strength and conditioning coach the end of last year, I think it was. Like, when you look at Gearoid Hegerty's physique, he's a walking, talking billboard for the increased emphasis, I guess, on strength and conditioning in the game as well in recent years.
Oh, big time, yeah. And it's probably a change in physique as well. Bulk would have been seen as being very important, maybe, you know, even, you know, if you look at the Armagh footballers from 2002, all big lads, big kind of musty fellas, whereas the physique of hurlers and footballers has probably changed a good bit there. You need to be probably a bit leaner. You don't need to be carrying that bulk as much because you need to be getting around the pitch. So it's a kind of a happy marriage between being able to get around the pitch and having that athleticism, but also having the power to be able to break a tackle, to be able to deliver a hit. So Hegerty to me is probably the prototype of a guy like that. And yeah, just to imagine to say he's delivered 3-14 from play in 3 All-Ireland finals and capped with that 1-5 only a couple of months ago. And just to see it, and just to see a lad who was so on point, so on his game. And I remember Cian Lynch saying after I was chatting to him the next morning, he just said, I was looking at Gearoid in the warm-up and he just looked so loose. And he was going around doing flicks and doing things like you do out in the garden, and that's just such a good sign. That's such a good sign of a player just enjoying it, just reveling in the occasion. And he certainly did. I'm interested to hear, I know you said there at the start, some interesting omissions, so I'm interested to hear what the omissions are.
My big one, I was expecting, when I came in this morning, I was expecting the Crucible or one of the
1 to 5 snooker was what I was thinking.
I was looking for five World Snooker Championship matches at the Crucible, but no, I'm only slightly disappointed that you didn't include the Crucible.
No, WWE.
But I know it's still, no WWE as well, so a couple of slightly surprising
no
omissions.
bar matches, like, I mean, it's
Unfortunately, I've been at the Crucible 3 or 4 times, but I've not been at, you know, a big world final or a big black ball finish or anything like that. Unfortunately, hopefully in time with the WWE, I have some great memories. If we're talking about best I've seen, yes, I'll put loads of them. Hulk Hogan against The Rock at WrestleMania 18, which Will O'Callaghan was actually at, which I'm sure he will have in his. You had to be there whenever that comes up, but I suppose it's different when you're thinking of what you've actually been at and what you've actually experienced. So they're my 5. Probably Shane O'Donnell in 2013, the All-Ireland final replay would probably been a close one as well. Just to see a guy coming in at 19 years of age and doing something like that totally from left field was unbelievable as well.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to Google photographs of Mick Verney and Hulk Hogan, and I fully expect to find some results given the nature of the conversation over the last half an hour thereabouts. Good man, you've been a gent. Thanks a million.
Thanks a million, folks. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Mick Verney there.
It was so unexpected.
You had to be there.
Covering Celtic at that time was a brilliant thing. The atmosphere at Parkhead was always great.
You had to be there.
Nobody ever talks about this game. Nobody saw it.
You had to be there.